This is Jim Pitzner with Feel It Nutrition, and I have the honor and pleasure of being able to interview Tim Boetsch today. UFC fighter, fights in a light heavyweight division. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing very good. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Glad to be here. I have a few questions for you. I wanted to ask you, after you received the most votes leading up to UFC 123, you won the Cazadora Spirit Award, which honors your strong will and commitment to the sport. Winning this award, I guess, puts you in a pretty elite group. Past winners were Randy Couture, Frank Mir, Rich Franklin, Forrest Griffin. What does this award mean to you?
Well, I thought it was, I was just excited to get nominated. When I saw my name on the list, there were only three guys, me, Phil Davis, and Gerald Harris was the other one. But just seeing my name on that list for the fight, I thought it was pretty cool that I'd even get the nod to get nominated. And then when I found out that I had actually won, I was, really stoked because obviously a lot of people voted. It was right on the UFC website, and my friends and family, we all put links up wherever we could to try and grab some more votes. But obviously, everybody that went voted for me. We got the most votes, and I was really excited.
You won by a landslide, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that's, from what I understand, it was pretty substantial. But the whole experience was very cool. I got to go and receive the award at the press conference at UFC 123. So I got to get up on the podium with the guys that are up there fighting in the main event and stuff. And then, of course, Cazadora donated $1,000 to my charity, which is St. Jude's Medical Center in Memphis.
Did you get any tequila, though? That's the real question.
I haven't yet. I told them I would definitely take some samples, so I'm still waiting on those to come in the mail.
All right. Well, you know where I am, so
all right.
If you have any extra. Yeah, you're known for being a pretty straightforward, even sort of a quiet, humble guy. Do you think this award shows that people identify with those traits in you?
I think so. I think the majority of people out there tend to respect the guy, like you said, that's a little more humble, not quite so flashy, and just trying to do whatever they can to get attention. I try to get my attention, positive ways by, training hard, surrounding myself with good people, and just doing all the right things. I think a lot of people can connect with that more than they can with somebody who's being obnoxious and just trying to get a rise out of people.
Absolutely. Although there seems to be a proliferation of sort of the latter group lately in the UFC, I think most people sort of identify with the type of fighter you are. In your most recent fight against Phil Davis during UFC 123, you had a pretty tough loss against a very talented up-and-coming fighter. Do you have any specific comments you'd like to share about that fight?
Well, like you said, Phil is obviously a very talented fighter, even more so a very talented wrestler. Was a national champion wrestler, and he's a great athlete. You look at the guy, he's a physical specimen. There's not a lot, I definitely can't make any excuses. He just was the better fighter that night. In the fight, I felt very confident. There was no part of me that thought I was going to lose that fight at all. I actually thought maybe it was going to be easy because I thought maybe he was just a pure wrestler. But then you saw at the end there, he caught me in that really weird arm lock. And I've never been submitted like that before in my entire fighting career, even in the training room. So
you actually had your arm bent back for. You actually fought his arm back before that for a few minutes.
Yeah, he was definitely cranking on it, and I held out as long as I could and got out of one position, but it was just really awkward. Like, I was half laying on my arm, and he was pulling and laying. I can't even describe what it was, but it was definitely torquing up my shoulder. And, when you're in there, do you let your shoulder tear out and then you can't do anything for 6 months? You have to have shoulder surgery, and you're probably not going to end up winning the fight anyway with a blown out shoulder. So that's kind of a mental decision you have to make in there. I chose to tap, which I hate to do, but you know, at least I can start training again right away and get ready for the next one. But,
yeah, I think you probably made the right choice there. I mean, that looked painful to me. But there was a moment during that fight when you had him in a really deep choke, and myself and from a lot of other people's point of view, I thought it was a split second until it was over. What happened during that part of the fight? How did you feel at that point in time? Did you feel you had him? Were you pretty close in your mind?
Yeah, I knew just from watching the video, we knew that he shot his double leg with his head outside. So that was going to open up an opportunity for me to go for my guillotine, which, you know, I'm pretty good with. I won a bunch of fights with the guillotine choke. Unfortunately, he shot to my left side, and my left side is my weak side. Had that guillotine been on the right side, I know I would have finished the fight there. As it was, that guillotine was very close to being finished. It was very tight. You know, when you're choking a guy and a person makes a certain sound and acts a certain way, they're starting to panic and get in trouble. And I know that I had Phil in trouble in there. And I think he knows it too. Like after his head popped out, there was a few moments there where I think he was gathering his thoughts and getting some oxygen back. Yeah, I was excited to finish that guillotine and very disappointed when I didn't finish him with it. It was close.
Yeah, it was really close. They're calling the submission. They're calling the submission that he had on you the Mr. Wonderful. Do you have any comments to that, or how you kind of mentioned a little bit how he got you in that position before?
I guess it should be called the Mr. Wonderful because I'm not really sure exactly what it was. I don't think there's a name for it out there right now, so he can take pride in having a submission named after it. But it was just a thing, you know. I let him get control of my arm, and obviously should have done more to get my arm back before it got to where it was behind my back and both his hands on it. Crank.
Well, he'll have the Mr. Wonderful, and you'll have Redneck Judo. So you both you started some things. Did you feel it was a fair fight?
Honestly, going into it, I was feeling like maybe it wasn't a fair fight, but you know, it wasn't going to be fair for Phil. You know, I thought I was just going to go in there and have my way with him, but obviously that's not what happened. But yeah, it was a fair fight. He's a very tough guy, and I like to think that I am too. I think you know, on paper we match up pretty well, and yeah, it was fair.
But the question really becomes then, did the fluorescent pink shorts that Phil was wearing cause you any distractions? It's a little blinding for me in the stands.
It certainly does. You hate to get beat up by a guy wearing tight pink shorts.
That's definitely true. So you don't think there was what you were saying, there's probably no way that you felt you could have trained better or been better prepared being that confident going into the fight?
Yeah, I was I even became more confident right before walking out. It just seemed like the energy was great in the locker room. It just felt like everything came together. I had a great warm-up. I had a good sweat going. Everything felt right to me. And, you know, obviously you can't go with being overconfident because I think, you know, I was definitely confident. There's no reason why I should have gone in there, you know, with any doubt in my mind, but I didn't. So,
yeah, I mean, do you see anything
that I'd do differently is, you know, make sure I stayed to my killer instincts and make sure that I don't get too technical in there. And remember that I am getting paid to beat somebody up, so that's what I should do.
So, if UFC were to offer it, would you consider a rematch with Phil Davis?
Yeah, I would fight Phil again. I think Phil's one of those, or a fight with Phil Davis is one of those things where, especially the way he and I match up, I think you could have several different outcomes every time we got in the cage together. So, yeah, I would definitely take a rematch with him.
Out of all of your previous opponents, where would you say he ranks sort of on the spectrum?
Honestly, I think Phil's probably the toughest guy I've fought. And for a couple of reasons, just because of the athlete that he is. And then again, you know, he's kind of an up-and-comer, so I don't think he's even starting to tap his potential as a fighter. So I think Phil's probably going to do some really big things in the UFC. And I would say he's the toughest guy I've fought so far.
Wow. Now, his background was in wrestling. He was, I believe, an NCAA Division I wrestler. You have a background in wrestling. You were a state high school wrestling champ. Do you believe that opponents that have a background in wrestling are more difficult, or easier in terms of you fighting them? Or is there not a difference?
No, I think wrestlers are probably some of the toughest opponents for anybody out there, just because, especially high-level wrestlers like Phil Davis, you're talking about NCAA Division I national champ. Somebody like that
obviously has athletic ability,
but even more so, they've been wrestling their whole life, which you have to have an incredible work ethic to be a wrestler. You know, wrestlers typically train year-round, you know, starting in high school. You know, the successful high school wrestlers don't take a season off or a summer off. You know, I won 4 state championships in high school, and I think a big part of that was because I didn't take any time off after wrestling season was over. And obviously, to be successful in college, you have to do the same thing. I wrestled Division I at Lock Haven University, and there was no off season. There was, you know, we were training for matches, or we were just training, but there was no time where we weren't training for wrestling. So I think in general, wrestlers make the transition to fighting really well, and they bring that work ethic where they're going to put the time in to become successful.
I think that makes a lot of sense too, considering that, you know, wrestling is probably one of the few, I guess, high school or even younger than that, sports that translates directly into the MMA. I mean, into MMA. I mean, you could make the case there's martial arts and so forth, but it seems that you don't get the same amount of practice time that you do with wrestling, where it's, you know, every day and it's matches and so forth.
And the thing with wrestling is, that's kind of a philosophy we have in Matt Hume's school, is that, you know, fighting and all these things, it really involves a lot of feel. Because, you know, you can learn a specific technique and put it in a real-life fight application, and that technique might not even come close to working. But with wrestling, you learn a technique, you learn to feel where your body's at, you learn to feel where your opponent's at. You learn how to work with your own body in a given situation. And if you've done that your whole life wrestling, of course fighting is going to come naturally to you.
So that being said, I guess, would you go as far as to say that the best type of fighter for you to go up against would basically be anybody who doesn't have a wrestling background like yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Excuse me. Whenever, you know, I look at, that's kind of one of the first things I look at when I find out who my opponent is. I want to see how much wrestling they've done in their life. And if the answer is 0, I'm like, okay, this guy's probably not going to be in shape, and is definitely not going to be able to stop a takedown, and, you know, this and that. But when you see a guy who's wrestled his whole life, you're like, oh, man, I'm going to get beat up a little bit in this one for sure.
Tell me what it's like for a fighter in the moments leading up to a fight. I mean, I've heard that there's some people who always throw up or they have to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
What kinds of things are you feeling when you're back there before you go out on stage and they're about to call your name?
Well, it's hard to describe, but the feelings you have right before a fight are some of the strongest feelings I've ever had in my life, as far as pure excitement and fear and anxiety, and it's a mix of all those things together. You know, I always question myself, like right before I go out, like, man, if I trained enough, did I do the right things? What more could I have done? It's really like an emotional roller coaster for me right before a fight. But fortunately, all of that tends to settle out as I'm walking to the cage, and then everything pretty much goes away when I'm standing in the cage looking at my opponent. At that point, it's just kind of like a moment of clarity, and I know what I need to do in there. But